Welcome everyone to the latest report for the channel. So finally got my Demon Codex in. It took about a week longer, I guess. There were some delays. But anyways, got the book, took a look through it, organized a game for this past Saturday, met up with some folks, and in organizing the game, ended up paired up with a guy playing Astra Militarum. I've played this particular player once before. He uses a lot of tanks, not surprising given the power of the vehicles in the current codex. So in figuring out what army to play, I brought my Nurgle Daemons and my Tzeentch Daemons with me, and because my regular Death Guard opponent was also there, and he was playing on the other table against one of our other regular group members, I decided let's have a Nurgle representative on both tables. Mortals on one, demons on the other. So here we go. Rolled up a relic mission, and let's take a look at the army lists and the deployment and get on into the rest of the report. So 2,000 points, Nurgle Daemons versus Astra Militarum, playing the relic. This is my list, and this is nearly all of my Nurgle Daemons in one list. There's probably half dozen Plague Bearers and a couple of Chaos Furies I have that didn't make the list, and that's really it. Everything else is that I own as Nurgle is what you see here. So Nurgle Prince with wings, he's my Warlord. Using a Great Unclean One, Epidemius, a Poxbringer, which is the old Herald of Nurgle, and one of the new Heralds, the Spoilpox Scrivener, who has a lot of really cool buffs on Plague Bearer units. So the two of them plus Epidemius are going to hang out with my big unit of Plague Bearers, 30 strong, Icon Instrument, and then I've got a couple of Nurglings to fill out the battalion set. So I've got a battalion, and then I've also brought a Outrider detachment, which is made up of 2 units of Furies and a Plague Drone unit, and a Vanguard detachment with 3 Beasts of Nurgle, 3 units of 4 Beasts of Nurgle. So lots of beasts, some fast units, and then I've got a Soul Grinder just in the list to round things out. So that's my 2,000 point list. Everything marked Nurgle, lots of wounds, lots of robust units, not a lot of shooting. My opponent's army is, to some extent, kind of the opposite. Tons of shooting, not very robust. Admittedly, the tanks are tough for obvious reasons, but his infantry is minimal to non-existent. I don't have a lot of infantry, admittedly, but that big unit of 30 Plague Bearers is kind of hard to kill unless you put a lot of emphasis on trying to kill them. So in the Relic mission, I feel pretty good about my odds here. His list, he's playing Talarn. Got a couple of platoon commanders, a command squad with a medic and a plasma gun. He's got a couple of tech priest engine seers. He's got a Primaris Psyker. Sorry, 3 Primaris Psyker, excuse me. He brought a couple of tank commanders. One's in a Punisher with heavy bolters and a hull-mounted laser cannon. Another one's in an Eradicator with a hull-mounted heavy flamer and sponson heavy bolters. He brought a pair of Le Mans Russ with just a heavy bolter in the hull. No sponsons on that. I think the Demolisher was outfitted the same way. Demolisher cannon, heavy bolter in the hull, and then another Punisher you can see. So lots of Punishers. Kind of scary. Those things put out a lot of shots. But whenever I play against this army, I forget that the Punisher shot is only strength 4 or strength 5, whichever it is. And so is less effective, less scary against my T5 army, T4, T5 army than it is other armies. He brought a couple of infantry squads. One has a Chimera with them, which has got the more or less standard heavy bolter, storm bolter kit on it. He brought a Basilisk with a Master of Ordnance. Excuse me. And then he brought some Scions, just I think to fill out his list. I'm not sure that he has a whole lot of extra options to choose from. When it comes to this army, he basically is more or less stuck with whatever he's got at 2,000 points is sort of the impression I got from talking to him. But he brought the Scions with the Torox Prime to fill out the list. So, deployment. We rolled up Vanguard Strike yet again, everybody's favorite. So yeah, that's what we got. So we're making the best of it. Let's see, I chose my side of the table and put him over in this side of the table. For those of you who watched the last battle report, the table's largely unchanged. I think I made a couple of adjustments to the table before anybody arrived, and was kind of thinking about where to move some things and put things when people showed up. And at that point, just sort of said, forget it, it's good enough. Not going to worry about it. So you can see here his line of tanks set up in the most open space he could find. Basilisk at the back with a massive ordnance. The unpainted tank here at the front is one of the Punishers, then the Eradicator, Russ, Demolisher, Russ, Punisher at the back, and then Infantry and Chimera up at the front. The Torox Prime and the Scions are going to be around the other side of that ruin. So you can see the rest of his line here with the Infantry up front, tanks in the back, and the Scions and the Torox Prime over here on the flank. My list going back across, so I've got Furies up here in this tower, Soul Grinder, Plague Drones at the front, Beast next to them, Demon Prince in the back there, Plague Bears in the middle and kind of wrapping around behind. All of the Plague Bearer characters are tucked in front of that bunker, little tiny bunker fortification. Beasts, more Beasts, and then Furies on the flank. Yeah, so you can see them a little bit better there, I guess. One unit of Nurglings is tucked in behind this ruin here. This is in front of my right flank where the Furies and the 2 units of Beasts are. And these guys are sitting on the relic. Because they're swarms, they can't pick the relic up, obviously, but they're basically just sitting on top of it to make it harder to get to. And hopefully not get as much shooting at them if I don't get to the first turn. Let's see. The Great and Clean one is in Deep Strike Reserve, so I pay the 2 command points to keep him off the table. We roll for first turn. I think we rolled the same number, but I finished deploying first, so the +1 for the roll-off did make a difference. I chose to go first. He couldn't steal the initiative. And with my army that has very, very little shooting, I basically advanced everything I have. Everything ran as fast as they could forward. So advanced up here on the left, and you can see how that all ends up. He used a preliminary bombardment before the game began. He wounded my Poxbringer, and he wounded this Beast of Nurgle unit over here on the left. And he might have, I think he killed a Fury out of one of the units, probably the unit over here on the left. Let's see. Yeah, Great and Clean one comes down via Deep Strike. He's going to try to assault this Punisher, kill it, and then go from there. Yeah, so you can see the Fury's tucked up behind, Beast behind, trying to avoid some shooting if I can. But I couldn't hide everything, so some units are just going to get shot. Let's see. So yeah, so that's just showing the Herald was damaged. Sorry, the Poxbringer was damaged. Got to try to get used to using the new names. Let's see. During Psychic phase, I get the Miasma off on the Great and Clean one, so he's going to be harder to hit. I think I failed on most of the others, although I did manage to heal up the 1 Beast unit that was wounded with the Flesh Abundance from the Poxbringer. Great and Clean one gets the charge here. I had to use a command reroll to make this happen, but I got it. The surprise was that the Nurglings managed to make both of their charges. So you can see this unit charged all 3 of the characters here on the end, basically. My thought was that if he heroically intervenes, which he's going to do, that I would at least be in a decent position to do something about his guys. Over here, took some wounds on the way in, but charged the Chimera. And then I'm going to be able to bring the infantry into the fight when I pile in. So this picture was actually taken because I thought the way he talked about the Primera Psychers that they were a unit of Psychers, because they're in the past they had Psyker units, and then he explained once we sort of got past this point that no, they were individual models, and I had to basically explain to him that if he wanted to use them in this, that he had to heroically intervene, that they couldn't just be standing there because they're not within an inch, etc. At least they weren't at the beginning. So they could be drawn in, possibly, but if he wanted to get them in the fight sooner, he had to heroically intervene with them, so it was a teaching moment. So we're going to sort of retcon that a little bit, and he's going to move those guys forward a bit. But the payout, when I attacked, so I piled in to the platoon captain. That was the guy that was the gray model that was standing where that red starburst is. And I put 8 attacks from the two Nurgling bases there into him, and the other unit went into the Psyker in front. The Psyker's fine, but I killed the platoon commander. Now this was big because when I was out of the fight, or not when I was out of the fight, but when the platoon commander died, this Nurgling base on the top right here was able to then pile in, and the Demolisher tank actually was the closest model at that point. It looks odd because of the angle, but the Demolisher, I measured it out, and it was like a 1/4 of an inch closer to the Demolisher tank than it was to the nearest Psyker. So that meant when I piled in, I was actually able to bring the Demolisher tank, and I'm within an inch. It's again because of the angle, it's hard to see or hard to tell, but I'm almost on. I'm within like a 1/4 inch, I think, of the Demolisher tank here with the green mossy sides and stuff on it. The other tank, I'm within an inch of it as well. So this Nurgling base has if it survives, has brought the infantry, the Psykers, and both of these tanks into melee, which is going to cut down on the shooting, assuming they live. Obviously, he's got a close combat phase with the Psyker staves, which do the D3 damage, so I won't get my disgusting resilient against them, and a psychic phase, so the Nurglings may not hold the unit up, but they're at least in position, if they survive, to really cut down on his shooting next turn. So this is pretty big. Great Unclean One waste the tank. I think I did like 22 wounds to it. So I didn't quite kill it twice over, but pretty close. So it was some pretty crazy rolling, I have to admit. Rolled lots of 5s and 6s for the D6 damage result. Over here, so he attacked with the Psykers, and I think he killed one of the Nurgling bases on the top, which meant that the infantry were no longer in combat with them. And yeah, so when he piled in, I'm not sure why these guys went this way, actually. They should have gone the other direction because they were close to the other squad. So I think we did this wrong, actually. Yeah, we did. These couple of infantry at the top here should have gone towards the other Nurglings and not come down this way. So we got that wrong with the pile in here. But anyways, he piles all this stuff in, gets most of the attacks, does 4 damage between the tank, which I think did a wound, and the infantry, killed a base worth of Nurglings. So there you go. And you can see this is the result here. So he did kill one of the bases. He did not roll particularly well for the Psyker attacks. He hit with 1 out of 3 attacks basically on all 3 of those guys. It was pretty tough. But he managed to kill one of the bases and get a wound through. So 5 wounds total is not bad. And that's basically the end of the melee, the fight phase. The payout of this is that both of those Russes, all the Psykers, the infantry, and the Chimera are all tied up in close combat. So about as good a first turn as you could hope for if you're the Nurgle player. All right, turn 1 for the Astra Militarum. He decides that Scions, even though they're supposed to be some kind of elite, best of the best, whatever, are basically sacrificial lambs. So he moves them up. They're going to shoot into the Furies, and then he'll go from there. He shoots and kills 4 of the Furies, which is pretty decent. He shoots the drones up on top with a lot of the stuff that he can see with. He's a little worried about them because they're movement 10, so they're a bit faster than the beast and some of the other stuff, and they're not quite as hard to kill because they have 1 less wound apiece. So he's making them target priority, killed 2 of them with shooting, and then assaulted them with the Scions. So the Scions have shot up the Furies and probably going to kill a couple more of them on the morale check. And he's assaulting the drone with the Scion, so we'll see how that goes for him. His other shooting in the psychic phase. His psychic phase was a giant dud. He chose to cast some other powers. He didn't try to smite. And he told me afterwards that he rarely ever uses psychers. That this was sort of just something he was trying because of the changes to the game. He hasn't played a lot of games recently with his army, and used a few psychers in 7th edition and hasn't hardly touched them in 8th. So this is more or less his first time using them, really, especially this many of them. So he tried out a few powers, and they either were just colossal duds, just didn't do anything, or the one guy who did try to smite, I think he rolled a 3 for the psychic test and failed. So, and if he re-rolled it, I stopped it. It just didn't go off. So yeah, massive failure. He goes ahead and charges the tech priest in to try to help out the psychers, clean up these Nurglings. If he can hit, the power fist has a pretty good chance, but it's not likely to hit, so he's in a tough spot here. However, he comes through between the tanks, which actually I think each one of them got a hit. It's an amazing thing. He couldn't hit hardly at all with his characters, who hit on 4+s, but the tanks who hit on 6s hit just as well. So it was kind of funny. But yeah, he cleans up these Nurglings. So at least now his guys over here out of combat, but they missed their shooting phase. So the Demolisher and that Russ have not shot at all this game. Let's see. And maybe it's only turn 1, but there you go. Let's see. The rest of his line, this you can see how things are looking back here. Over here, he continues the assault, and now because he did the other combat first and killed those Nurglings, there's nothing wrong with these guys all piling this direction. And when he activates the infantry, swarm in, but not able to kill this Nurgling base. So right now, that Nurgling base is still holding up the infantry and that Chimera. Oh, I think this is showing that I smited the Torox on the previous turn. That's all. So yeah, that was damage from my turn, not this turn. In the combat, he kills the plague drone. Plague drones never got to attack. he charged in and killed it straight up. So that was pretty funny, pretty cool. He couldn't get onto the relic with his what do you call it, consolidation overrun move, because the beasts are the closest thing over here to the right. So they are basically, the Scions are basically stuck there on top of the complex. The Furies, I think I rolled a 1 for their morale check, so none of the extra, none where the Furies ran away. So pretty cool for that. Sorry, pretty happy about that. And this is basically just a board overview. So the Nurglings and the Great Unclean One are doing exactly what we'd hoped for. The Beast on the right there, on the top of the page, top of the picture, and the Furies are now in position with some decent charge moves to be the second wave to crash into his lines. The Great Unclean One, unless I roll really terribly, should get into those 2 tanks at the top of the picture and keep the pressure on him. Beasts are probably going to ignore the Scions because I've got that huge mob of Plague Bearers that's going to come up on top of the complex and probably wipe them out. So moving on to turn 2 for the Nurgle Daemons. And over here I do exactly that. So I move up. These guys, I think the Beasts and the Soul Grinder are both advanced. The Furies and Prince, because they're faster moving with the wings, obviously could fly forward and get into charge range of the Torox Prime without too much trouble. So they're going to try to get rid of that vehicle over here on the left. The Plague Bear Horde swarms up onto the top of the complex. One of the Plague Bears picks up the relic. Beasts move forward. I believe, yeah, none of them Yeah, none of them advanced, so they're all going to be able to charge, and they're going to try to focus on cleaning up the psychers, and we'll see about the infantry if we have enough extra guys or extra time. So there's that. And the Great and Clean One comes over here. This is a very, very easy charge into the Eradicator. And that's his primary target. He's going to charge that, try to kill that tank, and consolidate into the other Russ and keep it from shooting. Great Unclean One makes his charge. In the Psychic phase, I think I largely failed. I might have gotten off a Smite with the Demon Prince, and I did a Fleshy Abundance to heal somebody with the Poxbringer. But outside of that, didn't get anything off of the Great Unclean One. He makes the charge, though. It's kind of hard to see from this angle. He's within an inch of the Eradicator. He's outside of an inch, just over an inch from the Russ, so he's going to be able to pile into that corner and bring them both into the fight. Over here, we make all of our charges with the Beasts and the Furies. The Furies were easy because they were very, very close. They charge basically all of the Psychers. And actually, I think I might have charged the Beast first. I think I charged the Beast first into all the Psychers. So they're in range. One of them is the one on the top there is going to be able to consolidate into the Demolisher and keep it from shooting again. The the Furies are where they are. They're going to consolidate in. I expect him to heroically intervene again with his Tech Priest, but I'm not too worried about that guy. Beast on the other side made a longer charge. The further forward Beast charged the Psychers because I wanted to get the Psychers and get that Demolisher to keep it from shooting. So I made their charge first because it was only like a 6 to get to the closest Psychers, and I rolled like a 7 or an 8. I then needed a 9 to charge these other beasts that were back closer to the ruins across into the infantry. And I got a little bit lucky. I think I rolled like a boxcar. It was pretty impressive. The beasts were feeling left out and lonely, so they went as fast as they could to get into the combat. Let's see. Yeah, so there you go. You can see where they all ended up. So I expect that infantry platoon to be eaten by the beasts, but we'll see how it goes. Over here, I charged the Prince first. I think I took a wound from Overwatch. I may not have, though. And then the Furies came in. Mainly, my idea here is that I expect the Prince to kill the Taurox Prime in close combat, and then when the Furies activate because they charged, they're going to use their 3 inches of consolidate movement, pile in movement, whichever one it is, to effectively move where the Prime is right now and act as a screen for the Prince against whatever shooting might try to come from the other side of these ruins. Sorry. Plague Bearers swarm the Scions on top of the building. The model here at the back on the edge is the Scrivener. And then you can see Epidemius and the Poxbringer just sort of hanging out in the back. Let's see. So this combat, yeah, we kill the truck, but it blows up and does, fortunately, just 1 mortal wound to the Prince and 1 mortal wound to the Furies. Furies are going to move forward, and the Prince is going to kind of move forward a little bit on his consolidation move, and then the Furies are going to move just a little bit in front of him. Over here, the Furies activate and kill the 1 Psyker that they're in combat with. The engine seer obviously piled in. When I piled in, I was able to bring the Demolisher in with the Furies, so I've already got it locked up in the combat. Beasts then eat the other 2 Psychers, so all the Psychers are dead. And again, when I consolidate, this is after consolidation, all of the beasts. One of the beasts now is in with the Demolisher, so it's kind of stuck. Not quite able to kill the squad with the beasts, though I come pretty close. Kill 8 out of 10, so I'll take that. Nurglings didn't do anything. He was able to wound the Nurglings with his infantry before they died, but then obviously failed the morale check pretty horrendously. Great Unclean One does exactly what the plan is. He killed the tank commander and the Eradicator, and then piles into, or not piles into, but stays with the Russ. And at this point, the Epidemius tally count is maxed out, and I basically said, okay, here's the deal with these Plague Bearers, but with all their buffs. They have 2 attacks a model. There's 30 of them, so that's, and they were all within melee range. So that's 60 attacks, 61 if you include the whatever he's called, the champion. They hit on 3s because of the Scrivener standing there. I reroll 1s to hit. They are strength 5. Okay, that really matters. I get to reroll failed wound rolls because of their plague swords. And I was like, "Do you really want me to roll this?" And he said, "No, it's fine." And he just picked up his guys. So, Plague Bearers wiped out that unit. I don't know what the math hammer says on how many wounds I should have done, but it's probably a lot. And so the Plague Bearers then swarm forward to the edge of the complex. And this is an overview. So yeah, a couple of my units haven't really gotten into the fight yet, and yeah, the Astra Militarum are just being worked. It's just not good for them at any point in this. And there's another shot of the focus of the battle. So we go to Astra Militarum turn 2. He uses his Remember the Fall of Cadia stratagem and his what do you call him? Tank Commander and the Punisher unloads into the beast. Everybody who was in combat fell back from combat. I think I forgot to use the beast's ability to get maybe the 1 mortal wound on a 4+, but it's fine. He unloads into the beast with the Punisher and just kills 2 beasts, 10 wounds outright with the Punisher. Does a little bit more damage to the unit with some other shooting. He kills a number of the Furies. I haven't removed them yet, and I didn't get a picture of it after the fact, but I think I'm down to like 2 Furies after his shooting. Yeah, so there you go. He then uses his remaining platoon commander, and he tried to charge with the command squad as well. The command squad failed their charge. The platoon commander charged the Furies, and I reminded him that, I guess he killed a 3rd beast. So yeah, so he killed 3 out of 4 beasts with his shooting phase. I reminded him that the Beast of Nurgle, if it's within 3 inches, is like a character and can heroically intervene. He said, "Oh, that's fine." He moved into range here. The beast intervenes. So yeah. When he fell back from combat with this tank, he drove around the Great Unclean One, but he didn't drive that far for some reason. I don't understand. I didn't understand why. But anyways, that's what he did, and I was still within 3 inches of him, so the Great Unclean One just piled back in, or heroically intervened back in. Great Unclean One not able to kill the tank, but yeah, only got it down to 5 wounds, so 7 wounds was a far cry from what he did previously. Especially with all the buffs, you would have expected it to die. Oh well. Beast, I think, killed the guy, the platoon commander. And with their consolidation moves, after the commander died, the Beast moved into the tank. I activated the Furies. They moved into the Tech Priest. Actually, no, I don't think they did. I think they're back. I think they're an inch away. They did not move into combat with him. Yeah, there you go. So this is basically the end of the turn. I still have to roll a morale check for the Furies. Furies failed their morale check. I think I rolled a 6 and they all died horribly. The lone Beast, though, managed to pass. I think I rolled a 1 for him. So happy about that. And again, basic overview of the board. Nurgle Daemons turn 3. The Plague Bearers swarm forward. The guy with the relic can't move that fast, so he's more or less shunted to the back of the pack. Everybody else swarms forward in front of him. The characters move up. The three Plague Bearer heroes are hanging out at the back there together. Beast, Soul Grinder move up. Over here, we're still locked up in combat. Another angle in the center. The Furies hop over here. And the Prince moves up over here. He couldn't make it all the way over this unit. So this unit was in the Chimera, and on his last turn, he got them out and moved them up here to try to get some shots. And then he backed the Chimera out of combat. So that's where this squad came from. Not sure what this is showing. Just position over here on the right. Okay. So Great Unclean One finishes off that Russ, given it only had 5 wounds. Not surprising. Over here in the middle, make some charges. I basically charged all 3 of the guys in the middle, and even though I could theoretically get to the Engine Seer if I rolled high enough. So I declared the charge. I didn't make it into him, but he then heroically intervened into me, so I can still attack him along with the command squad and the other Engine Seer here at the front. Demon Prince charged the Chimera and rolled high enough to hop over the wall and get into the combat. Basically, I used the Furies, declared their charge first. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. I declared a charge with a Soul Grinder first into the unit. The Soul Grinder took their shooting, didn't suffer any damage, and got into base with them in a sort of surprising way. I then declared a charge with the Furies. They hopped over the wall back around because they rolled high enough to get up on the 2nd level and get into the ruins, and then the Prince hopped over and landed more or less where the Furies are against the Chimera. So in the fight here, I killed one of the Engine Seers. I did a couple of wounds to the squad, a couple of wounds to the other Engine Seer. On the whole, not a terrible combat. The one beast up at the top was able to, on his consolidate move closer to the one guy on the end and then bring the Punisher into the fight. So the Punisher is now within an inch of the beast of Nurgle there on the left. This other tank is in combat with both of those beasts. I did not get the Le Mans Russ at the back into melee range. Let's see. Yeah, so this is where the Soul Grinder is. So the Soul Grinder declared a charge against the guys here. And I was actually thinking I was going to have to sort of run it along the outer wall here. There was enough space between the wall and the Beasts of Nurgle, which you can kind of see through the window here on the right, for the Soul Grinder to crab walk sideways down the length of the ruins and be within range of these guys up on the 2nd floor. As it turned out, though, I rolled a 10. I think I needed 4 or 5 inches to get them the crab walkway, but if I rolled a 10, I could run around the side here and get within range. So that's what I did. So lucky there. Once I got that, it changed pretty much all of my others, and there was enough space with this guy and the Prince. And actually, now that I think about it, I might have moved the Prince first and fit him in next to Furies, and then I did the Soul Grinder, and then I did the Furies. So anyways, you can see where they ended up. Killed all but one of these guys. The Soul Grinder is much improved. It's got a couple extra attacks at full strength. 5 attacks now instead of 3. So with the Demon Bone Claw, it gets 10 attacks. It's strength 8. Pretty badass. It killed 7, I think, and then the Furies killed another 2. So this one lone sergeant is all that's left. The Prince didn't kill the tank, the Chimera, but it got it down to, I think, 2 wounds, 3 wounds, something like that. So, okay. At which point my opponent rolled morale for the unit. He failed to kill anything with the sergeant here. Rolled morale. He died. At which point we called it. He conceded. So it's a victory for the Nurgle Daemons. And this was probably about as perfect a demonstration of what this army wants to do as I've experienced with trying to play it. The few times I've played it. Getting the first turn and then getting all 3 of the charges with the Great Unclean One and the Nurglings was really, it was game breaking. He might have been able to get out of it with a little bit of luck and brought some of his shooting back into the game on his first turn if his Psychers had worked a little bit better for him, or he'd been just a little bit luckier with them, but the dice weren't in his favor. Admittedly, when he told me what they were and what they were armed with, I was like, oh, well, this might have just backfired on me pretty severely, but it worked out. I got the invul saves when I needed them. He did not get the multiple wounds through when he needed them, and you saw the results. I think looking at the book, and I'll say a little bit more about the Demon Codex here on the next slide, but one of the things that was really missing from my perspective with the demons in the index was the lack of a deep strike option. The fact that when I first started playing demons back in, I guess that would have been the end of 4th or end of 5th. I guess it would have been 5th edition, end of 4th, beginning of 5th. They were all deep strike, and they were that way in 6th edition, and so to not have any deep strike was a little frustrating. Yeah, I mean, you can summon stuff, but that's the summoning rules, and the new edition work so very, very differently from traditional deep strike that it's not comparable. So my perspective has been of the index that there was this effect that was severely lacking. So I'm glad with the stratagem that they added a way to deep strike back into the demon army, and it makes it much more effective to run a pure demon army. Yes, you could take other chaos units, terminators, raptors, warp talons that have the deep strike capability, but me personally, I like the feel of a pure demon army. So I'm glad that I can at least deep strike some units. Things that I have, models, units that I have that I think will benefit from this, and I will probably, at least early on here, use the deep strike ability on, are, in addition to the Great Unclean One in this game and my Nurgle army, the Keeper of Secrets, who I found, I'll say more about him hopefully on the next slide, but I found him to be far too fragile. With only 12 wounds and a 5-up invul, it's a giant anti-tank magnet, and it's hard to hide, especially if you're playing on with the kind of scenery I have at this store, I've experienced at this store. Very few places to hide him. Takes too many wounds too quickly, becomes a massive liability. And Juggernauts, the Blood Crushers, I love them. I have 8 of them in a nice big fat unit that I think is just wonderful to play with. It's number-wise thematic, it looks cool, and yet it's not the most effective points-wise. So, in a fun game, sure, I'll play it and be perfectly happy. In a game that's we're trying to be a little more competitive, maybe, or we're trying to play in a more, I guess, match play theme area, and a lot of the folks in this store, in this group, seem to like to play the match play style of games. Juggers just are not cost effective, at least from my perspective. They don't have enough durability as compared to most bloodletter units. And most has to do with the cost. Juggers are 47 points a model. A bloodletter is 7. You can get a lot of bloodletters for the 3 wounds you get from a blood crusher, and for the most part, with all the anti-tank out there, especially where I'm living and where I'm seeing, Juggernauts just aren't worth it. But I will freely and gladly admit that with the deep strike option, and especially with the ability to bring up a Herald or a Bloodthirster or whatever character of Khorne that has the Locust ability on turn 1, and potentially have that be within range of a deep striking Jugger unit, so you get a reroll on the Jugger's charge after deep striking them down turn 1 and not having taken any damage, those things could all of a sudden become brutal, really nasty. So I'm looking forward to trying that out in future games, see how that works with the Khorne Demons and the Slaanesh Demons respectively. So the other thing that came up, we were talking about this, and there's some debate about the possibility of using pre-game stratagems more than once. So pre-game deployment stratagems, etc. I know one of the guys was saying that on places like Daka Daka and Reddit and some of the other places talking about the use of stratagems, that there's some consensus that stratagems can be used more than once. And I think there's some credence to that, especially because there are stratagems like the Rewards of Chaos ones. So any of the ones that pass out artifacts, you're allowed one artifact, but if you want, you can take more than one by paying command points. And the Rewards of Chaos one in the Demon Codex, as well as the ones in like the Space Marine Codex and others, for example, say very specifically at the end of these stratagems, you can only use this stratagem once per battle, which would suggest that there might be other times, other stratagems that would be used at a similar time, i.e. before the game begins, before the battle, that can be used more than once. And Denizens of the Warp, which is the stratagem that allows you to deep strike demon units, says that you use the stratagem during deployment. Now, as long as that's not a phase, it's not. I mean, it's obviously not a turn phase in the way that fight phase, charge phase, shooting phase, etc. are phases where in match play the limit exists. It's just a question of, is this the sort of thing where Denizens of the Warp, you get multiple uses of that in, say, open play or narrative play, and can just pay the multiple command points for it. Whereas in match play, that stratagem can only be used once. The Rewards of Chaos thing, it doesn't matter, presumably, what kind of game you're playing, unless you and your opponent talk about it ahead of time, and your opponent says, "Yeah, sure, go ahead. You blow all your command points and give every one of your characters a artifact." I'm fine with that. I don't really care, right? Unless you're doing that sort of thing, right? Even in match play, you're only allowed even in open play, you're only allowed the 2-3 artifacts at once. So that's where the discussion of this went. If any of you all, having now listened to my perhaps overly long explanation of this, can point me to some kind of official Games Workshop explanation or answer on stratagems, when they can be used, when they can't be used, if there's anything that clearly addresses this. I know it's early in the Demon Codex process and its existence, so I'm not expecting an official FAQ on the Demon Codex itself, but if there's something else you can point to, an official FAQ, an official commentary, whatever that could answer this, I would really appreciate it. So leave that in the comments if you would, please. If you have it, again, I would appreciate it, and thank you for help with that. Okay, let's move on. I have a few comments, not so much about the Demon Codex itself, but about my interpretation of the Demon Codex. So I don't want to present this as some sort of, I guess, authoritative commentary on it. This is just me and my play of it. So these are some thoughts, reactions from my 48 hours, basically, with the Demon Codex. So my initial reaction, and looking through it, reading through it, and thinking about some of the changes, that most things that got noticeably better didn't really need it. Again, this is just my perspective on it. But a lot of the units that I use and look at, that I was thinking, wow, this got better or that got better, I was already using them. I already thought they were worthwhile and effective units. They didn't need the buff. Flamers were the first one that I saw, because when they were 8-inch range on their shooting, I basically thought to myself, that seems fair in the sense that I can get them up with their movement, they get close, and especially in large units, unless I'm shooting at something that's toughness 8, like a Le Mans Russ, it almost felt like just, okay, I'm going to hit the delete button on one unit. I'm going to take my 8 flamers or my 9 flamers or however many I've got. That unit that I'm shooting at is basically dead. I suppose if I saw more 30-man units of Poxbringers or things of that sort, and maybe they're coming. Maybe people are going to start bringing them more frequently. I don't know. But it basically seems like any 5-man, 10-man unit, 5-man Space Marines, dead. It seems like 10-man units of Space Marines could survive, but you don't see 10-man units. At least I don't. So it struck me that with 8-inch range, they were reasonable because they could still be charged, not guaranteed, but potentially by units being just over 8 inches. And so you needed a slightly better than average charge range to charge the flamers and not get shot, which I felt was a fair trade-off for the most part, especially because the flamers, they're pistols, so if I wanted to stay in combat with them, I could shoot them on my turn anyways. And since I fly, I can hop out of combat and shoot them at other things if that's what I want to do. So from my perspective, it didn't really seem like that big of a deal to not be able to overwatch with the flamers in every possible scenario. Now, with the 12-inch range, I'm always going to get at least one overwatch. So that's a pretty big difference, in my opinion. And not one that I don't think they needed to have, especially because their cost didn't change. They're the same points cost. Everything else is the same. On top of that, I suppose because they got the strength user now, if I keep a Herald on a disc, sorry, what is he called? A Flux Master? Again, trying to get used to using these new terms. If I keep the Flux Master nearby, then the flamers are heavy flamers. So it's even worse for people trying to get in with the flamer units. So yeah, again, not sure they needed it, but they got it, so great. Thank you, GW. I appreciate it. Yeah, Flux Master is what he's called. Okay. Similarly, the Screamers. I thought the Screamers were a little underpowered, maybe. So on this one, I suppose, rather than having them get the bonus to their attacks, because basically what GW did was they said, whoever the people doing the book said was all 3 attacks can be the mandible maw attack, right? The high strength, high AP, extra damage attack, which is cool. They're better. I'm not sure they really needed it. Plus, now with the new rule, you can fly over and get the slashing attack without advancing, so there's no trade-off. In the previous version of the Screamers, you had to some extent, pick and choose. Do I advance, and in so doing, maybe get a bunch of slashing attacks and get myself into a position where I can assault in future turns? Or do I move up and then just get a regular assault? So there was a trade-off to be had. Now there's no trade-off. There's no real downside. It's just a question of, am I close enough to fly over something and then attack? Or do I need to advance? And if I fly over something, great. Who cares? Awesome. It's a 6-up to get the mortal wound, so I'm not really relying on it. Again, no change in points cost on the Screamers, so not sure they needed it. But I guess I got it, so thanks. Soul Grinder got noticeably better in the sense that, again, it has the extra attacks and its shooting ability. Its main, the Phlegm Bombardment, went from a D3 to a D6. I used them before. I found them to be fun units. And again, it was a question of a trade-off with them from my perspective. Do you advance and use them as close combat dreadnoughts to move up and get into the fight as quickly as possible and forego their shooting? Do you try to get a little bit of both by moving up? They take the negative modifiers to their shooting, and so only hitting on 5s or 6s, depending upon how damaged they are. And so you're not as effective shooting, and you're still not in close combat, or maybe you shoot a little bit and then assault, which is kind of, it's nice. Or do you not move them at all and try to use them like a gun platform and just shoot? I'm not sure they needed the buff or buffs that they got. Again, thankful to have them. It does make them more effective, and for no points cost change, great. The Great Unclean one, I understand exactly why they made it 18 wound model, especially because they released a new big model with a new size and everything, so it's harder to hide. You're going to have a harder time getting it completely protected from all shooting attacks. So fine, it's got the extra wounds. It's appropriate for the model of that size and type. My model is the smaller one, the old hunk of metal. So my guy benefits from it without the negatives, just because of being an older model. Um, it is what it is. You know, other than that change, looking at the Great Unclean One, I think a lot of its changes are effectively lateral moves. Um, so instead of its BS getting worse, now its strength gets worse, which is not insignificant, certainly. Um, but it makes for a relative reasonable trade-off to some of the other things it can do, and its increased toughness or increased wounds, things of that sort. So on the whole, I think you could say that it's better. You could say that it's not any better. Um, Either way, it was a good model before. It's still a good model. Didn't really change. Didn't really. If it's better, it didn't really need it, but it's cool. So, and then the other one again is all the new Plague Bearer heroes. Um, I thought Plague Bearers were a great unit before, especially in large numbers. I think perhaps more so than any of the other demons. I found Plague Bearers to be the one unit that really benefited from being a large unit. The T3 Bloodletters and Demonettes just died in droves. They were too fragile. They're only a 5-up invul versus 5-up invul, 5-up feel no pain, and their lower toughness meant that for the same cost, the Bloodletters and the Demonettes just died so much more quickly than the Plague Bearers. So I never really found either of those two units in large numbers. The few games I played, many of them you didn't see here on this channel, they didn't get the benefits of their bonuses. The Plague Bearers, though, because of the cloud of flies and the extra toughness and everything, they've been good in large numbers, and they're that much better now with the Scrivener and the Piper and the whatever. So I'm not sure they needed the buffs, but they've got them, right? So that's sort of my initial reaction, is that the things that really needed it for the most part, the things that got better didn't necessarily need it. There were only a couple of things that needed buffs and got them. So the Skull Cannon, for example, it I think a lot of people will agree with me. At least I hope so, because it seemed to me pretty terrible all the way around. The few times I used it, it got better. Its cost went down significantly, almost a third of its points, and more shots with the cannon. And they got rid of the silly, if it's shooting at 10 or more models, it gets the D6. So now it's just a flat D6 all the time, and they increased its range. So demons now have a viable artillery piece in the form of the Skull Cannon. Like, all right, pretty cool. So I think that one benefited and is good. The Pink Horrors, this is more of a, in comparison to the alternative, I used Pink Horrors before. I didn't really use the blue and the brim that much. Sorry, back it up. I didn't really use the brimstone that much. I did use the blue, so I balanced my pink and blue effectively in units. So with the points cost on Pink Horrors being reduced, the blue and the brim staying the same, and the changes on the invul save in particular, maybe we'll see more Pink Horrors being played versus the blue Brimstone Horrors. I think the survivability change might have been a reasonable thing to do to balance those out. Be interested to see what other people think or do, and if it really has the change effect. I know a lot of folks are talking about taking like 30-man units of horrors, because at that point they get all these extra shots with their so if they have 20 more horrors, they get assault 3 instead of assault 2, and now because their shooting attack, instead of being a flat 3, is strength user, you can put a character, a change master or a flux master or whatever it's called, next to them, and they'll be strength 4 with their shots, 18-inch assault 2. Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll see some more horrors. They might be one unit that before was not worth taking in large units, that maybe now will be worth taking in large units, like the Plague Bearers, coupled with some character support. So that could be a nice change. All right. So I think those are two that the people who did the editing and the changes to the codex, I think they got those right. I think those are good. The big two that I think as far as needed buffs and didn't get it, were the Keeper of Secrets and the Juggernauts. I've talked about the Juggers on the last slide, so I won't rehash that. But the basics, not survival enough, cost way too many points. Yes, hit like a ton of bricks, but just not worth the points. And the Keeper of Secrets, same deal. Right? Too fragile for what it does. Too glass cannon. Again, with the addition of the Deep Strike, I think those are fixable, or you can work around it with the proper application of stratagems. So not too big of a deal ultimately. It's one of the few weaknesses I see in what the folks who are putting this together have done. So that's sort of my impression of that. Again, not the worst mistake. Again, there are workarounds, but would have been nice for them to have been a little better. Either a little better in terms of abilities, or actually I think preferably a little cheaper in points. Wouldn't have been significant points cost reductions on the Juggernaut. 9 points, 10 points maybe, and maybe that is significant. I'll say maybe that is too much, but some reduction in cost I think would have been reasonable. The Keeper Secrets, flat 200. Right now, I think it's 223, something like that. If you make it flat 200, or something like that, I think that could have been a reasonable balance. Just my impression again, just my interpretation. My initial reaction is that my power curve. Now, I'm not saying this is that this is how everyone should rank the various mono-themed demons. But my impression of the power curve of how I use or play demons is that Tzeentch is still number one for me in terms of effectiveness. I think that army, based around Flamers and Screamers for the most part, Heralds to buff, and the occasional small units of Horrors, is going to remain largely my most effective and flexible unit or army. The buffs to Flamers and Screamers make them just that much better. And I think there are very, very few situations that army, with its 4-pin vulnerable saves and its shooting and its now improved close combat, won't be able to handle. Okay. With the various buffs to Great Unclean Ones and the Plague Bearer hordes, and the fact that the drones and the beasts and all of those other things, I didn't talk about them in this one because they were already buffed and improved by the Death Guard codex, and those changes just were copied and pasted into the Demon Codex. The Nurgle army, I think, if it's not tied with Tzeentch for me, it is an incredibly close second, just because of its robust survivability. I think Khorne closed the gap. They were a little bit farther behind. So the Tzeentch to Nurgle gap, and then I think Khorne was slightly further behind Nurgle for me. Due mainly to survivability issues. They're both melee close combat armies. So Khorne was a little better at killing stuff, but Nurgle was more likely to survive and had as good a ability to kill once you sort of got going with Epidemius, getting the count up and things of that sort. So from my perspective at least, Khorne was a little bit farther behind Nurgle than Nurgle was behind Tzeentch. Khorne's closed the gap, I think. It's not as good as Tzeentch and Nurgle, but it's pretty darn close, especially with the Loci ability. Its ability to reroll charges makes it really, really nice. But of course, Nurgle also has the bonus of doing extra damage, so against multi-wound things, it's, again, less of an issue for the Nurgle army. All right. And Slaanesh remains a distant fourth. There really weren't any significant changes to that army. Yeah, there were a couple of bonus attacks here and there, so like their chariots got an extra attack. The Keeper Secrets did get a close combat buff, so it's -1 hit in close combat, which is nice. My problem with them is they never make it to close combat, so
maybe with the change to Deep Strike, they might be a little bit better, but yeah. So on the whole, my initial reaction with the various changes in points costs, um, there are some minor things here and there. For example, Karnak got a huge point drop. He dropped almost a third of his points, um, or maybe it was over a third. Anyways, significant point drop. So he might become a viable option if you're playing Khorne, especially if you want to go all themed and play Flesh Hounds, which also got cheaper without any other noticeable drops. So that's pretty cool. Others were made more expensive, and I think perhaps justifiably so. Bela Kor, who I love to use on a regular basis, got more expensive. 40 points, justifiably so, I think. So, not terribly upset with most of them. Initially, I was a little disappointed. That was probably my gut reaction. I wanted more from it. And maybe that was an unreasonable amount of expectation. But based on what I was seeing from a lot of other folks in terms of their reactions to their codexes and the things that they were getting, the new toys and whatever, for me it fell a little flat initially. As I look through it, there's some nice subtle buffs, some subtle benefits, some neat bonuses here and there. Gonna spend some more time with it. Gonna try out some more tricks and things of that sort and see how it goes. But there you have it. Again, just my reaction. I don't want you to take this as gospel or believe. I think that this is how you have to understand or interpret it. But for those of you that play demons or play against demons, just some things to think about as you're going through your 40K experience. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it valuable. Hope you enjoyed the report and some of these thoughts here that I share with you at the end. Sorry for rambling on so long. If you found it boring, you probably already turned it off. If you didn't turn it off and you found it boring, thank you for sticking with me. Again, hopefully, if we didn't do it as good as we wanted to, we'll do it better next time.